Oh, it's going to be to record whether we want it or not. So let's pause. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Zonta International District 3 Governor's event. We'll be featuring a conversation about human trafficking. I'm Lisa Burton. I have the privilege of being the governor for District 3 for the biennial 2022 to 2024. For those of you who do not know Zonta, Zonta is an international organization of professional women and men who advocate and serve for the benefit of women and girls globally. We have clubs in over 62 countries. We are over 100 years old as an organization, and we are a membership-driven club, which means basically that our club members decide what we do in a democratic fashion. So in that light, we had a polling of our members, and human trafficking is an issue that we wanted to upraise, and that is what we're doing right now. So before we start, I just also want to note that we are going to be celebrating some of our clubs. Our Zonta year is June 1st through May 31st. And in this last year, we had a number of clubs doing outstanding things. And we are going to celebrate their achievements. So before we get started, I just want to briefly note that this program is going to have bits and pieces of our acknowledgement of our achievement awards, as well as talking about human trafficking. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to Lois Roman as our first presenter, moderator presenter. And so Lois, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And I'm so happy to be here this morning and to join everyone on this very important topic and discussion. For those of you who don't know me, I'm currently the president of the Zonta Club of Suffolk County, formerly the Area 1 director and secretary at the district level, and I've been a Zontian for many years. I'm really happy to introduce the outstanding panel that we have for the first portion of this discussion, which is, what is human trafficking? And hopefully those of you who don't know will come away with some insights into what is going on. Our panel this morning is really wonderful, and I'm going to introduce each of the panelists right now and then ask you to take over from there. If any of you have questions in the audience for the panelists, please post them in the Q&A, and we'll have a chance to answer them during the program. The first speaker that I'd like to introduce is Kate Lee. And Kate is the executive director of the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking. She has a BA in politics from the University of Warwick in the UK, and she spent most of her career working as a BBC radio news and current affairs producer in London. She relocated to Tokyo and worked for NHK, which is the Japanese public radio and television, and then she moved to the United States. She served as the New Jersey Junior League State Public Affairs Committee chair and as the president of the Junior League of the Oranges and Short Hills previously. She was appointed to the Governor's Advisory Council Against Sexual Violence in 2009, and she was the co-chair of that organization from 2013 through 2018. So let's welcome Kate at this time. Also joining us for the first program is Gina Cavallo. And Gina's bio is quite extensive, and I apologize, Gina, because I've edited it down a little bit. What's important to know about Gina is that she is a survivor of childhood abuse, domestic violence, and sex trafficking. And now she advocates for others. She's a consultant with the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and she serves on the Board of Trustees and coordinates a Survivor Leadership Advisory Council. She was appointed by the New Jersey Governor Murphy as a commissioner for New Jersey Against Human Trafficking. And she also is a co-chair of the American Academy of Pediatrics Anti-Trafficking Task Force. In addition, through her work with the New Jersey Department of Education, Gina has helped develop guidelines for schools on human trafficking. She's had a career in the New Jersey Health and Human Services Department. And then she's founded nonprofits Paying It Forward Foundation, which provides disaster relief, as well as We Rise, which is a survivor assistant organization. In 2020, Gina received the National Liberators Award for the Survivor Leaders. She served with Shared Hope International, which some of you may know is very active in this area. And she's a member of the Survivors Leaders Institute and Survivors Alliance. And I think we can all look forward to Gina's forthcoming book that's coming out in 2023. And last but certainly not least, our third panelist for this morning program is Candace Burke-Parrott. And Candace is a life coach, public speaker, influencer, advocate, and social entrepreneur. And she serves at-risk youth, survivors, and those who are less fortunate in a proactive way. She's the founder of Freshwaters, which is an organization that offers individuals a fresh start and a new beginning. She has a passion to bring out the best in people and organizations. She serves as the co-chair for the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force Public Awareness Committee. And she's also the founder of CSP Consulting Incorporated, which is a human resources consulting organization for more than 32 years. So I thank you all for participating in this panel. And I'd like to now turn it over to you.
Well, I guess, do you like me to start? I didn't know if somebody was going to moderate questions,
Yes,
but I think I'm just
I'll
going to
moderate for you if there are any questions.
Well, I mean, so I think first of all, we were going to just explain what human trafficking is and get us started so that we're all on the same page. And so just for legal definitions, human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of forced labor or sexual exploitation. But I do want to just make sure we really understand what that means, because oftentimes it's confusing. I know a lot of people who are listening have got a lot of experience of this, but I've heard some people repeat it a little inaccurately. It's force, fraud, or coercion, but we need to understand that sometimes those can act together. So for example, force, we can imagine that's violence and you know, physical restraint and so on. Fraud is more like trickery. And so for example, somebody might be tricked into being a human trafficking victim, either for labor, you know, for a job that they think they're going to get, or a modeling job that turns into sexual exploitation. But there may be force employed as well. There certainly may be coercion as well, but there doesn't have to be those. It only has to be one of those pieces that should be proved in a court for it to be human trafficking. However, if anyone is under the age of 18, force, fraud, or coercion doesn't have to be proved. And I'll just give a quick example. You know, in New Jersey and in the federal government, as I say, if you're under age of 18 and you're in commercial sex, that's commercial exploitation, that you're automatically a victim of human trafficking. And it's therefore much easier sometimes to prove in a court of law, because all you need is your age. You don't need to try to find what that force was, what the fraud was, what the coercion was, what those sort of the tricks and the blackmail and so on and the threats were. In New Jersey, a couple of years ago, we had a 40-year sentence given to a man. Actually, there had been a man and a woman who were trafficking two girls, ages 15 and 17, in a hotel in New Jersey. In New Jersey, the penalty is 20 years per count. There were two victims. So this gentleman, as I say, he was also working with a woman. So we need to make sure we're not stereotyping. And of course, those affected could be boys, girls, men, or women. They happened to be two girls who were teenagers under the age of 18. So he was given a 40-year sentence. And that's how it's proven. But obviously, there are many different forms of both labor trafficking. There are many different forms of sex trafficking. It's a very nuanced crime where sometimes the victims do not recognize, in fact, that what's happening to them is something that is a crime, that is not their fault. They are convinced by their trafficker, their pimp, whomever, that it's their choice. And to understand those nuances, it's critical to speak to those with lived experience, to understand the way that traffickers manipulate people. And so that's why we in the New Jersey Coalition are so thrilled and honored to always work with our survivor team, led by Gina, our survivor leaders, who can talk about the nuances of what those tricks look like, what that manipulation and the coercion looks like. So I just want to leave it there and probably move on to the next section.
Good morning, all. I'd like to talk about what it is to be survivor informed and survivor inclusive. So survivor informed practices includes meaningful input from diverse communities of survivors at all stages of the program or a project that you're involved with. That's including developmental, implementation, and evaluating everything that we do. This is also coming from the Trafficking Victim Protection Act of 2000. And many times organizations who apply for grants, they need to demonstrate that they are survivor informed. Being survivor informed means that you are inviting survivors to the table in everything that you're doing, whether it be a conversation, whether it be implementing a project, doing PowerPoints. It could look like many things that your organization is doing. And we need to be careful too, because there have been organizations that have been liable by some survivors where there are suits that are going on because survivors, if they feel that there's tokenism going on or exploitation, that's not what we want to do, and that's what we want to avoid at all cost. And what that means is that where you may be bringing a lived experience expert to the table and they're really not having their voice heard. They're just sitting there because you filled that part of the obligation by bringing a survivor to the table, but they're really not being heard. It's like their voice is just kind of muted and everyone else is talking. That's called tokenism. That is clearly tokenism. I'm not saying that if you have 6 people at the table, it doesn't mean that you need to have 6 survivors at the table. But it is important to look at it that you may want to have definitely 1, if not 2, that's fine too. However, we need to make sure that it's done by being survivor informed. And when we look at being survivor inclusive, we're looking at making sure that we have different survivors at the table. For instance, within our coalition, I'm not the only survivor there. We bring many survivors to the table. In fact, just yesterday, someone reached out. They wanted me to speak at a particular event next month. And I declined, and they says, well, we'd really like you to speak. And I says, but I feel that there's another person for what you're looking for that I feel will really drive that message home where I don't have that expertise. So yes, we're all survivors, but we all have different lived experiences. So my experience may not fit into the message that you want to send home to your audience, depending on what the topic is. So one of the common questions we do ask is who is your audience and what is the message that you want to bring home to your audience? So if it has to do with education, if it has to do with, say, a particular experience a survivor may have had in the healthcare field, then you may want to have a particular survivor that had experience, negative or positive, in the healthcare field when they were a victim or as a survivor. If it's something to do with domestic violence and childhood abuse leading into trafficking, that's my expertise. If it's something to do with familiar trafficking or boyfriending trafficking, and then that's something that I would recommend I not do. So this is what we talk about when we bring different survivors to the table, because although we all share that same trauma and pain that we went through, we all have a different expertise with our background. It may be someone that is working specifically with children then I would have somebody that specifically works in that area. Everybody has a different expertise. So one of my friends, she, for instance, has experience in the banking field. And that's who I would call and reach out to if it was related to anything having to do with banking. But most importantly, it's very important that we are survivor informed. And I like to say being survivor inclusive, because being survivor inclusive covers a multitude of areas. It means that we're inviting the white, we're inviting the brown, the Black community, we're including the LGBTQ. We don't want to leave anyone out. We're including the men, everyone. So that is really important. And that's how we become a well-oiled machine, a well-informed organization, because the people that know, and this, like I said, this does come from the Trafficking Victim Protection Act that's in law. And even if an organization wanted to qualify for a grant, one of the things that they have to demonstrate in order to qualify for that grant is that you are survivor informed. I'm going to give you another example, what we have to do before I wrap it up. What we have to be careful about being survivor informed. It doesn't mean somebody comes to you and you need a survivor and says, oh, I know someone. You just can't pick a survivor, choose a survivor because they were in the life and I know so-and-so, I'm going to call her or I'm going to call him. That's not a good practice, and I'll tell you why. So for instance, there's a survivor that was invited to, she was invited to a gala. This is a true story, and this didn't happen to just one individual. She was invited to a gala, and another survivor was invited to another large event that an organization was having. And they asked her if she would speak. And first of all, by the way, you never have, I'm trying to crimp as much information as possible, so bear with me. So you never ask a survivor, share your story. You don't do that. You ask them to share what they're comfortable sharing, but this is the message I want my organization to take away. So we don't want to make anything into sensationalism, but these two particular survivors, they currently have a lawsuit. And what happened was that the organization not only wasn't compensating them, one of the survivors, I believe, got a small amount of money, but the other one didn't get anything. But it turned out that both organizations walked away with a lot of money from both events. And that is looked at as exploitation. Another organization, and I'm not mentioning names, they're always online. What they do, they help survivors and they provide assistance. But what they do is they'll take a picture of the survivors and then they'll post it on Instagram and Facebook and say, this is what we did for so-and-so. That's exploitation. And not all survivors will know that. And this is why I cannot emphasize this part enough. This is why it's very important who you invite to the table. A survivor, and this is by the National Crime Victim Law Institute, states, and I'm reading this, a survivor is a person who endures adversity, moves through it, and perseveres, overcomes, who remains undefeated, self-care, grows. And what this means is that when we invite survivors to the table, we want to make sure, so we call a victim who is still in the life, or a victim could still be out of the life, but they're still in the victim mindset. A survivor is overcoming. And how do we overcome? We overcome by our self-care. We grow by continuing to educate ourselves. And that's through conferences, mentorships, engaging in our personal healing, whether it goes be going to counseling as a maintenance, our professional development, including, having that support group around us. So for instance, just to give you a quick example, my growth, my continual growth, it doesn't mean a survivor says, oh, I'm a survivor now. I went to counseling and I went to a support group, so I'm healed, I'm all better. That is not how it works. In the real world, it doesn't work at all. If anyone comes to you and says, oh, I don't need counseling and I'm okay, that's a red flag. Because, for instance, Teresa Flores, she's a survivor leader. She's actually a mentor of mine, and she provides survivor retreats, several of them every year. And she has beginner retreats, alumni retreats. The point is, it's very important to our healing. No one heals and says, I'm all better. It's a journey, it's a process. So it's very important, I can't emphasize enough, who you invite to the table to make sure that that person is in a good place. And there's a lot of layers that are involved when I bring survivors to our organization. And I'm pretty consistent and I know how to do that, which I have been doing it. And we've been very successful at that, because we could have good intentions, but if we don't do this in a careful and mindful way, we could end up unintentionally causing harm than not. So I hope that helps. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer and do my best to help you through this. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina. We'll take some questions at the end of the 3 presentations.
And Gina, I was just going to add to that, because again, working closely with survivors, I think it's a gem of what you just said. And it really is important that people realize that, because very often when you get invited to speak, people will say, oh, can you bring a survivor? And it goes back to that word of sensationalizing, right? So people have to be mindful of that. Now, assuming that some of the people on here today are just learning about human trafficking and what it is and understanding what it is, and you may not be quite where we are. Obviously, we deal with this every day, all day. But that's why, what Gina said is important, because you have to be mindful of when you ask somebody to do a presentation, which we're always willing to do. However, you also have to be mindful of, your audience. And so I just say out there, if there's anybody on this call today, if there's anything that we say or anything that you read that bothers you, please let somebody know in the chat. It's happened so many times that I never ever do a presentation without saying that. And so again, if there's anything that you experience, please reach out to somebody, however you can on this call, to make sure that we get you the help that you need. But again, that whole trauma, exactly what Gina spoke to, please be mindful of other people's intellectual property. And when you're telling their story, make sure it's okay to tell their story, because a lot of people do use that for their funding, and they do it with good intentions sometimes, and sometimes not with good intentions. So I just want to say thank you, Gina, because that was very well explained.
Thank you so much, Candace. I just want to add one other point. Someone last year came to me and said that we'd like for you to get us a survivor. And usually my questions are, who's the audience? What's the message you want to get across? How many? And so on and so forth. And they said that the audience is going to be family and members of those with disabilities. Now, any one of us that knows what disability means, disabilities are not always visible. People have special needs, and there's like layers of what that means. But this particular person wanted someone with a visible disability. Does anyone see what's wrong with that? A visible disability. So I was triggered right away, and I knew why I was being triggered, but I had to compose myself and say, why? Why do you want someone with a visible disability? And she said, because we want to drive the message home that this happens to people with disabilities, which is true, but it's not it doesn't mean it's a physical disability. There's so many layers of where I could have a disability, by the way, which I do have a special need, but it's not visible, or it may not be to some or most. But it really was triggering. And we need to be cautious about that. So what did that tell me? That told me, I'm not giving you anybody. I'm not going to recommend anyone, because you know why? You need training before you need a survivor to come up there to represent. And that is what we need to understand. If people don't talk to you in your organization about bringing survivors to the table, that's not good. I would always ask too, I want to mention this, anybody you collaborate with, it's very important to ask when they say, hey, you have a survivor, we can collaborate, or whether it's for you or someone else you know, I would always ask this question first. Have they had the basic foundation of what is human trafficking? If they say, what are you talking about, or no, or what does that mean? Have you had any HT 101 training? Because we do provide that. And I think it's very important that we are all educated, and there's many educational tools. The New Jersey Coalition, we have many speakers. We have a speakers bureau that goes out and provides HT 101 in person or virtual. Polaris has a great tool too that you can, it's an hour, and you could even be certified after that I recommend, and Kate as well. But it's so important, you know, I wouldn't bring a survivor in. You want to make sure that that person you're talking to is really sensitive and mindful of what that means, because even a survivor that's in a good place, that's on their healing journey, that has that self-care tool belt, that's doing all the right thing, we all know trauma is trauma. You know, it doesn't go away. You just learn how to deal with it. But we never want to have organizations like Zonta, which has an outstanding, impeccable reputation, and all the work that you all are doing. You never want to have that compromised by bringing someone in that can turn around and have a triggering and disaster effect afterwards. Thank you.
And Gina, to that point, I think, you know, for the audience that are listening to this, I think you have to ask yourself where you're at. And to your point, because it's the same in Maryland, at the task force, if we don't vet somebody, then they're not associated with the task force. That's a red flag for somebody. And so, you know, that's how we look at it. If somebody says a certain organization, as you said, they're out there, we won't speak bad of the organization, but what we will say is they're not vetted by the task force. So I think for the audience, you have to ask yourself, where are you in your knowledge? And there's no right or wrong. The fact that you showed up today is key to us, because the more people that learn, the more people that tell, the more people that share, the more we can end this, because it really is more preventative. So I say that to say that if you're on the HT 101 level and you want to get that training, we have a number of organizations throughout. Zonta can get you that information. Even I'm in the Baltimore, Washington area. We have people there that can do the HT 101. If you're at that next level and you're ready to do, you know, the survivor-led training, or to learn something along that point, and we may have survivors in the audience that are just looking for resources. So whatever your need is today that you showed up, we just ask you, you know, to, you know, whatever we take, however we can help, that's what we're here for. We're here to help and educate and inspire and inform. So however we can, you know, please ask your questions in the Q&A.
And to that point, we have had a couple of questions, and I don't want to take too much time because I see that we're almost out of time on our session here, but I think you answered one of the questions, which was the difference between exploitation and promoting. And I think, Gina, that you really, and Candace really kind of covered that, and the motives matter. And there was another question regarding why would somebody use tokenism? Like, what's the point of an organization having tokenism? Is there any advantage?
I would say there's a double answer for that, because if we are lacking the education in what we're doing, we may not be intentionally doing the tokenism. There are people in organizations that are using survivors, and they think they're doing the right thing, by bringing in survivors, but how they go about it can be wrong. And that is where the tokenism comes in. For instance, if you bring in a survivor at your meeting because you have a project you want to do, and you're bringing in that survivor and you're all sitting at the table and everyone's talking, but the survivor isn't really involved, that's tokenism. And whether or not they know they're doing that or not, I mean, to me, it's pretty clear. I was in a few of those situations and I knew I was being used as a token. I know when I am today. And it's very upsetting. It's very frustrating, but it's ignorance on the person's part, or it can be even that they're not really getting it.
Thank you very much. I have posted in the Q&A, I'm not sure if it came out, the website for the Polaris project that Kate shared. So thank you so much, Kate, for that sharing. And if those of you who are in the audience cannot see that, if you could just post something in the Q&A and let me know that you're not seeing that, and then we'll get those resources to you as quickly as we can. Okay. And I think I'd like to thank the panelists. If there are no more questions, let me just see what we have. They can't see that. Okay. So we'll figure out a way to get you guys the resources so that you have the contact information for the various organizations, the New Jersey Coalition, as well as Polaris and some of the other agencies that were discussed this morning. But thank you to each of the panelists. And I'd like to now, I guess, turn this over to Jan Marie or Lisa.
Yep. Hi, thank you. Thank you so much, Lois. Thank you, Gina, Candace, and Kate. That was wonderful. When we were putting this program together, I just want everyone to know that, you know, it struck me a real chord with me that we needed to be survivor inclusive in our program. We have a lot of really great resources in our Zonta world. We certainly have members who work in this field, but it's important that we also are really mindful that we are not just in a vacuum, and that we don't have all of the answers, and that even with our best intentions, if we are not truly focused on why we're doing this work and the impact that it can have, that we're really not doing the right thing. And I think as women of a certain age who might have been marginalized in the workplace, or women, you know, the women of color on this call who definitely sometimes are excluded from conversations, we can understand where that is coming from. And so I thank you again, my wonderful panelists, for joining us this morning and for being here with us. And thank you, Lois, again for moderating this portion of it. So I am going to share right now, I hope, my screen. Or you know what, I'm gonna let Giovanni share the screen, the first PowerPoint of our achievement reports. Right, our achievement. Yeah, because I'm gonna hit the wrong button, I'm sure, and mess it up. So Giovanni, can you do that?
I can. Give me one moment.
Okay, thank you. I also want to thank everyone. We have 67 participants this morning on a cold, rainy October 1st. I applaud you for joining us today, and thank you. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds, and if it's not working, oh, here we go.
Sorry, that was not the
No.
right one.
Okay,
I clicked it, but didn't go to the right spot. So let me try this one more time. I do not know what's happening.
okay. You know what? We're gonna move on. That's perfectly okay. Flexibility in all things, because we know that technology is not always our friend. So, all right, so the next portion of this program is called Hidden in Plain Sight. And it basically is going to be introducing the red flags from a number of speakers that we were so blessed to have. But our moderator for this section is Jan Marie Brown, and she is with Hope Store in Westchester, New York. I'm going to let her introduce herself as well as the panelists. So, Jan Marie?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Lisa said, my name is Jan Marie Brown. I am currently the Chief Program Officer at Hope Store, which is a domestic violence agency located in Westchester County. Not only do we work with victims of domestic violence, survivors and victims of domestic violence, we also work with victims of human trafficking, both sex and labor trafficking. And for me personally, I've been working with victims and survivors of commercial sexual exploitation, as well as domestic violence for a little bit over 13 years, both in New York City, as well as in Westchester County. So today we will be talking about the red flags of commercial sexual exploitation. And I am going to begin by introducing our first speaker. And her name is Wincy Terry Bryant. And international recording artist Wincy Terry Bryant is a native of New York, New Jersey, who's worked with music industry giants such as Sting, Tina Turner, Dorothy Norwood, Tom Jones, and Grover Washington Jr. Wincy is the featured singer on Moni Love's hit single, It's a Shame. Her voice can be heard on TV commercials and the famed children's series Sesame Street. CEO of Wincy Co. LLC, Wincy leads a team of educators and teaching artists to combine music with the national core to create a series of curriculum-based educational programs. Wincy Co. offers NJEA certified school assemblies and professional development workshops. These programs offer alternate approaches to learning by integrating performing arts techniques such as music, drama, and dance to various topics including Black history, Latino history, women's history, human trafficking, drug awareness, cancer awareness, to make learning engaging for the audience. Creator of Traffic Jam, a program that uses the arts to educate audiences about human trafficking in our local neighborhoods, and executive director of Nana Babies, nonprofit organization, Wincy was selected to receive the Phenomenal Woman Award by KISS FM for her innovative children's programs. She was chosen Woman of the Year by Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Inc. for her efforts in raising human trafficking awareness. And without further ado, I would like to present Wincy Terry Bryant.
Thank you, Jan Marie. Thank you, Lisa. To my friends on the panel, my colleagues at the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking, Gina and Kate, Candace, so nice to connect with you. I'm Wincy Terry Bryant, and I am the arts director of the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking. I'm also a proud member of Zonta Club of Essex. And I'm excited to have this opportunity to speak to you about human trafficking from an arts perspective. I started this series called Traffic Jam, the series of live performances that raise awareness in our local neighborhoods about human trafficking that's happening right under our noses, because I realized that people didn't understand that trafficking is more than abduction. They say that there are approximately 40 inroads to trafficking. There's what you call boyfriending into trafficking. So I have my professional actors join me on stage to demonstrate how something like that could happen. Take a look.
Ooh, it's freezing out there. Finally, a place of our own. Dave, I'm so grateful.
Hey, you deserve it, baby.
You know, when you first asked me to move out here with you, I have to admit, I wasn't sure it was the right thing to do.
No kidding. It took me 4 years to convince you.
Hey, don't judge me. I didn't want to leave my friends and family. My mother's still mad at me for leaving, but when you told me I could fly back home anytime I wanted and see them, I was sold.
Yeah, but your moms will eventually get over it, and we'll make new friends out here. You know, we'll start like a whole new life of our own.
You're so good to me.
Yeah, and hey, I got the landlords to make us all new locks because I gotta keep my baby safe out here. Here's the key. Why don't you go outside and try it out? You know, make sure it works because new keys can be tricky. I'll go hang our coats up.
Okay, baby. Lock the door behind me so I can try out the key to our new place. I just love the sound of that. Our new place. What's wrong with this key? Dave, it's not working. Baby, can you hear me? Dave, the key is not working. We're gonna have to talk to the landlord tomorrow. Dave, can you hear me? Dave, it's not working. Dave, open the door. It's cold out here.
Okay. I want you to listen to me real good. Are you listening?
Yes.
I really want to make sure you can hear me good, Alyssa. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. The only way I'm going to open this door is if you come back here with $100.
Stop fooling around. It's cold out here. Dave.
Did you just hear what I just said? Are you really listening, Alyssa? The only way you're coming back inside is if you come back with $100.
Baby, where am I supposed to get $100 from?
Well, I don't really care where or who you get it from, but that's what it's going to cost you to get back into this house tonight.
Let me hear you say predatory alienation. If you've ever seen a show on the animal kingdom on television, you'll notice that when any animal chooses his prey, he divides it from the pack. If hyenas want to attack a lion, they must first separate him from the pride. The same is true of human traffickers. They insist on alienating you from friends and family. They hack into your mind, first making you believe that you can trust them. Then they make you believe that they're the only one you can trust. Once they succeed in separating you from your support system, they make you paranoid about others, and finally, they destroy your self-esteem. Most victims don't see this when it's happening. It's like boiling frogs. If you drop a frog into hot water, he'll jump right out. If you want to boil a frog, you must first place him in cold water and turn up the heat slowly. He won't detect the temperature change, and before he knows it, it's too late. Most victims admit that when they look back on the steps that led them to become a victim, they felt something was strange, but they dismissed it. They chose to ignore the signs and forget everything their parents had taught them. When something feels awry, it's probably because it is. All of the scenarios are based on true stories, conversations that I've had with survivors, research that I've done. And parents always ask, well, what should we look out for? Take a look at this screen of apps. The apps are constantly updated, but these are some of the apps that predators circulate in, looking to engage your children in conversation. Some of these apps cost money, like video games, money to progress to the next screen. One of the ways that traffickers engage potential victims is to buy them the card for the platform that is too expensive for your child to access without their help. And then they say things like, you owe me. Parents also ask me, well, what if my child is not a gamer? Should I be aware of anything else? Absolutely. I always tell parents that if your child is suddenly coming home with things that you know that they can't afford or that you did not buy, ask questions.
Man, it is crowded in here.
Yeah, man, you know, that's the best time to hit the mall. And you sit right here and watch me work.
Come on, man. I got it. I've seen it 1,000 times. Let me get one.
Nah, man, not yet.
Why not?
Because, man, you're not ready.
Not ready? It's not that hard. Come on, bruh. I am ready.
No, you're not.
How you figure?
Yo, man, you still nervous. You look nervous. I mean, look how you bouncing your leg up and down. Yo, that type of behavior will bring us unnecessary attention. And we can't have that. Now watch and learn. Hey, do you model? I mean, because your eyes are beautiful.
Yo, why didn't you go after her? She was fly. Did you see her?
And that's how I know that you're not ready.
How? What did I do?
Because, man, if you were, then you would know that she is not the one. Look, man, we looking for girls or boys with low, better yet, no self-esteem. They're easier to work on. You compliment them enough until they believe it.
How long does that take?
Takes however long it takes, man. It could be weeks, months.
Months? Months. Man, I'm trying to make some fast money. Why can't we just wait in the parking lot? Grab one of these kids and throw them in the back of the van like we used to do. Go sell them to a pimp up in New York or down in Philly. Boom, we're done. Fast money.
Yeah, and that's one way of doing it. But yo, that way brings on that unnecessary attention that I mentioned before. You see, parents notice when their kids don't come home. They'll call the police. Depending on the neighborhood, it might even make the news. Shoot, at the very least, in the hood and the urban neighborhoods, they'll put the child's picture on Facebook. Have you seen this kid? It only take a second to share. And now we stuck with our little sleeve, fighting, kicking, looking for any ways to escape. Nah, man, that's too messy. Don't get me wrong, though. They tell me to do it that way, I'll do it. But I've learned it's much smarter ways to build our stable of slaves. See, what you got to understand is this here, it's an investment of time. If you can get the right victim to trust you, make them believe that you love them, get them to think that they can't trust anybody but you. You see, you start off being really good to them, really generous. You buy them expensive gifts. I'm talking designer bags, clothes, the latest cell phone. Yeah, once they get used to this lifestyle, they'll never want to give it up. You got to teach them that they can't make it without you. And then suddenly, you fall on hard times. Get them to believe that you need them. And by this point, they'll be so convinced that you love them that they'll do anything for you. And I mean anything. When you can learn to hack into somebody's mind like that, I'm telling you, man, you can leave that cage wide open. And your pretty little bird won't even try to fly away. That sounds like a lot. A lot compared to what? Okay, we do it your way. For every person we sell, yeah, we'll make about $1,000 a day. But if we do it my way, we can sell that same person 20, 30 times a day and make 10 grand every day. It'll pay off in the long run. Hey, beautiful, do you model? Hey, hold on. Can I holler at you for a second?
Backed by popular demand, Traffic Jam, the arts event that uses drama and music to educate audiences about the dangers of human trafficking, returns to Irvington, New Jersey for a one-day power-packed event. International singer and teaching artist Wincy Terry Bryant will be joined by her cast of professional actors and musicians in an epic stage play that combines the power of storytelling.
You know, when you first asked me to move out here with you, I have to admit, I wasn't sure it was the right thing to do.
With games and giveaways that teach strategies for safety and tips on how to recognize and avoid human trafficking in our local neighborhoods. This event is free and open to the public, so bring all the people you care about. That's Saturday, October 29th, 2022, at the Deliverance Jesus is Coming Church, 815 Springfield Avenue in Irvington, New Jersey. For more information, log on to trafficjam.info.
Once again, I'm Wincy Terry Bryant. I hope that was enlightening. I hope you'll join us at our next Traffic Jam on October 29th in Irvington, New Jersey, co-sponsored by the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking and the Zonta Club of Essex, and sponsored by the Women World Changers. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
I know that was pre-recorded, but I'd like to thank Wincy for that informative video, as well as her discussion with regards to how trafficking is introduced, as well as the thought process behind the traffickers when they are trying to find someone that they can exploit. And that happens all too often. As she said, everything that she got in these videos and she brings to the stage are things that she's heard from survivors, things that people have reported. So it's, very important. And I'm glad that we were able to hear those things and be more enlightened on this. I would like to now introduce Dr. Epps. Dr. Epps is a pediatrician and dermatologist at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. For over 20 years, Dr. Epps was engaged in pediatric dermatology, education, and the clinical practice of dermatology. Dr. Epps was in private practice of dermatology in Silver Spring, Maryland. She is associate clinical professor in the Department of Pediatrics and Child Health in the Department of Dermatology at Howard University College of Medicine, and associate clinical professor of pediatrics and of dermatology at George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Dr. Epps has been certified and recertified by both the American Board of Pediatrics and the American Board of Dermatology, and is certified by the Subspecialty Board in Pediatric Dermatology. Dr. Epps is a diplomat of the National Board of Medical Examiners. She is licensed to practice medicine in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and Florida. From 1997 until 2011, Dr. Epps served as Chief of Dermatology Division, Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Because of her unique training and qualifications, she was invited by a research assistant and grant reviewer for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Food and Drug Administration, and invited to give advice to federal regulatory bodies. She served as a member of the Advisory Committee on Dermatologic and Ophthalmic Drugs for the FDA, and participated as an invited expert in the Best Pharmaceuticals for Child Act meetings. Active in professional organizations, Dr. Epps is a fellow of the American Academy of Dermatology and a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Dr. Epps is currently president of the Medical Society and Alliance Foundation in Washington, D.C. With that, I would like to introduce Dr. Epps. Good morning, and thank you for being with us.
Greetings. I'm Rosalind E. Epps, MD, and I'm a member of the Zonta Club of Washington, D.C. Today, I will present Human Trafficking Clues and Tattoos Hiding in Plain Sight. Human trafficking is in the news. In August of 2022, the FBI announced that Operation Cross Country 12 had rescued 84 minor victims of sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. The youngest victim was 11 years old. 37 children who had been reported missing were identified. Dozens of adults who were trafficked were also located, and 85 suspects were arrested across the country for their offenses. Human trafficking is a global issue. Anyone of any age can be a victim of trafficking. In addition to sex work, the enslaved persons can be used for labor in many industries. The exploitation may be associated with poor living conditions and abuse, and associated, therefore, with health and financial problems. Who are the victims of trafficking? Anyone is a victim of human trafficking. The majority of the victims are women and girls. The average age of a sex trafficked victim is 12 to 14 years old. They may be of any race, ethnicity, and any socioeconomic level. Who is targeted for trafficking? Those who are vulnerable, those who've been displaced by war, natural disasters, or unemployed, runaways who are struggling financially and need shelter are targets of trafficking, as well as LGBTQ plus individuals. Persons who are struggling financially, who are unemployed, lost their jobs, or struggling academically, students who need tuition, supplies, or housing are targeted. Those who are lonely, have family issues, as well as migrants, are all targeted for trafficking. Who are the traffickers? While some assume traffickers are men, over 40% of traffickers are women. Often the trafficker is known to the victim and may be a relative. And traffickers can be in positions of authority and respect in the community, including clergy and law enforcement. What are the traffickers' methods? Traffickers groom their targets with purchases, affection, and support. Sometimes they create dependency through drug addiction or providing shelter. Additionally, blackmail, threats, and physical and emotional abuse are utilized. Since the pandemic, traffickers have used technology to directly meet and recruit victims. The internet allows anonymity, and various approaches are used, from employment opportunities, modeling offers, and other ways of soliciting victims. Explicit content is shared or used for blackmail. Transactions and movement are controlled through apps and can be difficult to trace. So what are the general clues of trafficking? An inappropriate affect or avoiding eye contact is a big clue. The person may be dressed for summer in the winter, or vice versa, or wear provocative clothing, which is inappropriate for their age. Conversation, or when they answer questions, may seem scripted or rehearsed. In the workplace, school, or in the healthcare setting, there are certain clues that trafficking may be occurring. Forms are not filled out completely. Date of birth seems off, the address is wrong or misspelled, or it may be a business location is given as an address. Traffickers hold identification of the victims so that they do not have identification cards or papers. While paying cash may or may not indicate trafficking, using a card with another's name on it is a red flag. And the victim does not speak or respond. Only the trafficker or the dominant person speaks. There are also physical clues. It's possible that trafficked persons may appear malnourished. There may be signs of abuse, including bruises, particularly of the soft tissue areas, the torso, the ears, the eyes, and the neck. There may be cuts and bruises of different ages and stages of healing. Maybe poor oral health, as well as tattoos and branding. So, question. Approximately what percent of adults 18 to 34 years have at least one tattoo? A is 25%, B 33%, C 40%, or D 60%? The answer is C. 40% of adults 18 to 34 years of age have been estimated to have at least one tattoo. Now, certain tattoos may indicate that a person is trafficked. Traffickers tattoo their victims to mark what they consider their property or show ownership. The tattoos may relate to money, such as this dollar sign, or a barcode may be used as a tattoo. Here's a barcode on an area commonly tattooed, the back of the neck. Traffickers tattoo the neck, arms, and above the groin more commonly. Traffickers also tattoo their initials on victims. Traffickers tattoo their names on victims. Property of tattoos send a clear message. Years ago, some used to think, oh, she must really love her boyfriend. Property of. Now, property of tattoos give a different perspective and may be a clue for human trafficking. These tattoos show how victims can be sold or traded to other traffickers. These tattoos show that some names are crossed off and others added. Crown tattoos have been associated with trafficking victims. However, crown tattoos have become very popular and are of different sizes, locations, and meanings. Therefore, while all crown tattoos do not equal trafficking, they may serve as a clue of a trafficked person. Tattoos inside the lip are often used by traffickers, and just like crown tattoos, some non-trafficked persons have tattoos inside the lip, particularly when they don't want the tattoo to be readily visible. How could this issue be approached? One method suggested by a survivor advocate and an ER physician is to ask in an open-ended, non-judgmental way, tell me about your tattoo. Usually, you may get one of 3 different answers. One response may be, oh, my friend and I, or my buddy and I decided we would get tattoos together, and this was how it happened, and this was the event. Another response could be, well, I drew this design and I went to the tattoo parlor and talked to the artist, and there was a discussion and the colors. So that's another approach that you may hear as a response. The third response may be, it is not something that I would choose. This response is a clue for human trafficking. In conclusion, this was a brief overview of clues and tattoos which may be associated with human trafficking. The clues may be obvious or subtle. If you see one clue, look for others. Behaviors, health status, and clothing may be clues that you have encountered a trafficked person. And while tattoos are common today, certain tattoos may be indicators of human trafficking. Since anyone may be trafficked, a victim may be detected in many situations. So be aware and be on the lookout. Although there are many resources available, here are 2 resources that you may find useful and that were used for this presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Epps, for that. I have a question. I know that this happens tattoos happen far too often with those that are trafficked. Again, females and males, but most of those that do come forward are females. And they do have dollar signs, barcodes. I've seen some with like ice cream cone with like an arrow that was specific to the trafficker. And you mentioned how many times they've been sold to someone else, the kind of the supply and demand. They're with one trafficker, then they move to another one and it's crossed out and they put another name. Are there any resources that we could possibly provide to anyone as far as people that we may know that are helping to kind of move people that have those type of tattoos to removal or just removal of those tattoos and those brandings?
Yes, thank you for your question. There are dermatologists who are in public service and will remove tattoos for as part of the process of healing and recovery. And I believe they do it for free or for minimal charge for some of the victims. And some of that is through the networks that they make that service available. So there are people in the community, in the medical community, who are aware that and will remove or treat some of the tattoos that people have had, not only for traffickers, but people who are returning citizens and others in the community.
Thank you so much. And, you know, one thing is, even working in this field, I kind of learn something every time I do a webinar or I hear someone speak. So thank you for continuing to educate not only myself, but those that are participating with us today. And for our last panelist, we have Dr. Brooke Bello, who has a pre-recording that will start shortly.
Sorry, give me one more moment. You know how technology is. Give me one more second. Thank you for your patience. We'll get started now.
Hello, I'd like to introduce everyone to Dr. Brooke Bello. Dr. Brooke Bello is an author, thought leader, justice advocate, actress, techie, champion against human trafficking, and the founding CEO of More to Life, which is in its 18th year anniversary, and a new startup called Eval. Aside from holding a PhD in pastoral clinical counseling, she was recognized with the Lifetime Achievement Award from President Barack Obama and the White House, the Advocate of the Year Award from Florida's Attorney General Pam Bondi and Governor Rick Scott, named by United Way Worldwide as a hero on the Oprah Winfrey Network for her work, and most recently named by Google as a Google Next Gen Policy Leader 2017 to 2022, and 2019 Department of Justice ATF Division Victim Advocate of the Year. Her new book, Shame Undone, comes out in 2023 and has been optioned for a limited series and a motion picture. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited about your summit. I hope that all your attendees get a lot out of it.
So it's great having you here with us today. And I know that we're touching on human trafficking. And as you are the expert in this, if we can just discuss it and you can tell us a little bit about, what your efforts are with your agency and how you're working towards ending human trafficking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's important to understand that about root causes. As a woman of faith, and as someone who went through the torture of child trafficking, and having had the opportunity to serve so many other victims to get them in the spectrum at More to Life, my motto is based on something I call victim to survivor, survivor to thriver, and thriver to champion. Because someone doesn't actually know that they're a survivor unless you know you've been a victim. And sometimes there's this process around victimization. I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to be a victim. But if you, in fact, were a victim of a crime, you have to admit that you were a victim. Then you realize, oh my goodness, I survived something that I thought, as close to 90% of girls, and the high propensity even more of boy victims, think it's their fault, as children do. And so you don't really realize you've been victimized. And so one of the most extraordinary red flags that we've seen in our work, having rescued over 7,000 plus victims and worked with millions of individuals or supported them by partnering with federal agencies like HHS and like the White House and doing the keynote there when President Obama had this all-day summit giving a highlight to this issue even back in 2013. He should get credit for really bringing an extraordinary light to it. But I think that the mental behavior health management, the therapy, court advocacy, victims who are teen mothers of children or pregnant by traffickers, often family members or others. There's this propensity within the court system, sometimes juvenile justice system, to cause case plans and to make young people do things they're not prepared for, not necessarily giving a light to the fact that they're victimized. And so there's this process where we will assist someone in finding a caretaker for the baby so they can fulfill a court program, and then we do diversion programs. And so the work is really deep and long. We like to say, it's about 5 years within our program to really find some level of sustainability. The red flags for young people these days are vast because they're the root causes, and then there's those sort of proliferation of things that are like on the outside, where there's not just trafficking, because people think they understand that, but exploitation. Oftentimes under federal law, someone's repeatedly raped and they think, oh, I was just sexually abused. Well, that's bad enough as it is, but you could have been trafficked as well if there was pornography involved, if you were underage, if a photo was sold without your permission, if there was pornographic videotaping involved, if you were youth and it was repeated. A lot of that is under the TVPA that passed in 2000, which has reauthorized, giving focus on the fact that it was trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation of a child. And I think that these days in our work, about 30% are young boys. As a matter of fact, the men that we serve who are former traffickers and also buyers of what is called commercial sex, it's important to understand, I don't believe that sex is commercial because I don't believe it's sex. I don't believe that you can buy intimacy or love. It's something, but it's not that, because most involved don't even want to be there. And so how does someone relegate when a young girl says yes, but she means no because she was, or he were kind of grew up in this process of exploitation and abuse? They don't know any different. It's almost like ingraining something into a young person after a period of time, after the sexual assault, the rape, the molestation, then finally you're actually being trafficked, either by a family member, which is a high rate, and then, or by someone else who has taken you, kidnapped you in the street, like what happened to me, or some other situation that was criminal. And so the work we do and have done for 18 years is all of those deep down services, in addition to removing kids or assisting the child welfare out of a home where it's happening and breaking some of the trauma bonds. And then the sustainability of, believe it or not, most victims, I was made to have a lot of abortions, but a lot of victims are able to keep or want to keep that baby by that trafficker. And it's a very difficult thing. And then we've seen it where they wanted to, but the courts wouldn't allow it. And we've pushed and done wraparound services and everything we could think of with our expertise to push that. And it's actually happened. We advocated for that. But for every one victim, it's costly, it's time consuming, and it's extraordinary that people still don't have the sort of weight or understanding of the root causes and the exacerbation of it, and how there was an uptick during the pandemic as well. And finally, I would say that some of our work now, working with the Carlyle Investment Group, connected to the Picasso Family Biothink ID, I've been able to have a new book coming out called the Fine Heart Table Book, which is, I've curated paintings from artists that are all survivors of human trafficking and exploitation. And their work will be seen in a new genre of art at an event in Monaco in October. And this will enable survivors to actually create income from their work, to become artists, to learn about entrepreneurship and NFTs. And so we're really trying to push the narrative in a really unique way. I guess last thing I'll say is we do independent living, because most survivors can't always live in a group home for very long, or some not at all. And so doing wraparound services in their own studio apartments or tiny homes or larger apartments, we find is really expedient, and it pushes them forward to that independence.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it working in commercial exploitation, and as the acronym is CSEC, it's people don't seem to realize. A lot of people hear about trafficking and they think it's, of course, overseas. That's still the taboo, right? Like, it's not here, it's not in the States, when it's in fact literally in your backyard. You wouldn't know. And you guys, and it's really, you guys are doing great work. Unfortunately, these services are needed, but it's great that you guys have these services available. And you were saying, talking about the red flags. Some, I know that in some of the cases that I've worked with, they were victims of molestation. And having been victims of molestation, there are a lot of times that you're recruited by your friends, or someone's like, we're going to go hang out, we're just going to do this with someone, or just hang out, and anything can happen. And like you were saying, they can be picked up off the street, they could be trafficked by a family member. There are so many different ways it's happening. And with social media, it's 10 times worse. I mean, in between the different websites that there are to do those things, and they're not, there's no sanctioning, there's no stopping it. It's youth, and no one wakes up and says, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want to do. It's unfortunate that people think that, like, oh, they're in it. A lot of the kids that are in programs that are involved in CSEC are forced to kind of look like runaways, right? So that they're not looked at. But you guys are definitely have these services for them. Wraparound services is so key. So I definitely commend you. You're a champion, as you said. And you're championing for, these youth and everyone that else that, has experienced commercial sexual exploitation. There's a question that came in, and it says, if survivors don't recognize that they've been trafficked, how can advocates reach out?
One of the things we do at More to Life is sort of built this program around our framework model, so that not just More to Life, but other organizations know how we do what we do. And I think that's really important. And one of them is identification. If a victim doesn't know that they are, it's not really easy, or it's not really difficult for us to identify them. So one way, obviously, are services within juvenile detention. When you have someone who's in foster care, we know that the high rate of victims have been in the United States foster care system. And so you mentioned just a minute ago about molestation. Well, the devil's into details. And it's something about the negativity and the criminality of those who have the sort of dark disposition to want to harm others, but they spot certain vulnerabilities, and they pick up information based on confidence or lack thereof. And so, I know in the book, Big Pimpin', he would talk about going into the mall, and if he were to look at a young girl and say, oh, you're such a beautiful girl, and she said, oh, thank you. He's like, okay, next. Oh, you're such a beautiful young girl. No, I'm not. You think so? He already has an end because then he's going to try to build you up to tear you down. But I think that identification, if you've been molested, you already have a root cause that connects you with a profound vulnerability. And so in that sense, even if it's not trafficking, but you're led into a situation where there's domestic violence with a boyfriend in high school or even middle school now, or date rape, your ability, especially if no one knows, it hasn't been reported, you're a young person who's not getting therapy, the prevention of human trafficking and exploitation is key. And so molestation is absolutely a red flag. Being in foster care and having a mental behavioral health issue, but not necessarily having the right therapy consistently, and having been a previous victim of sexual violence. And if you look at the sexual violence, oftentimes it actually was trafficking. We've identified so many kids that by looking through their case history, it was trafficking all the time, and they were putting it off on, because trafficking comes under certain services with the state. So the more victims you identify, the more you have to pay, and the higher the day rate for child welfare to pay for that child to receive care. And so you have to really push and fight for that. Obviously, if you have a young person, especially a girl who's a part of a gang, right? There's no such thing as a girl who's a part of a gang where there's boys. She's being trafficked. She's being exploited. She's not climbing through a window, stealing things. She's being sold over and over again. And not just sex trafficking, but obviously domestic servitude and labor trafficking are all mixed in. And it's important to know that sex trafficking is actually a form of labor trafficking under federal law. And so all of those issues, if someone suddenly has, obviously the stuff that people know for 15 years, tattoos, new tattoos, branding, not hanging out with children their own age. Their social media is at a high rate, and they're befriending people that they don't even know. And there's a lot of men or young boys, which could be a older male on the other side of that social media platform. Boys are often trafficked through the gaming. I'm a gamer, I love technology, but you have to really understand and know, is that picture in that social media profile who your child thinks it is? And children should never befriend anyone on social media that you don't know at school, or that's not in your family, or that your family doesn't know. It's just not safe.
Yeah, and it isn't safe, but again, this area, this day and age of social media, and as you said, COVID kind of there was an uptick in commercial sexual exploitation and the abuse of children, and social media had a big part to play with that. So for parents and caregivers, right, that have a concern, I mentioned that sometimes you have children that, it looks like they're running away, right? They come home, they come back, they have new clothes, they leave again. And some people will be like, oh, they're just a difficult child, or they're not listening, or I don't know what to do. What would you say to those parents? And what would you recommend them to do to kind of actually assess if in fact they're dealing with, unfortunately their child has been a victim of, commercial sexual exploitation?
When children are exploited, what's exploited first is their temperament by the things that they see. Thousands of violent images, thousands of sexual images, things that are quite derogatory. Parents often talk at their kids rather than really listen to them. When children run away, they're running away from something. And there's a lot of shame and guilt around feelings that, prepubescent kids have, especially going into adolescence. And if you don't have a parent who's willing to be open and listen and to support their children, someone will, because sexual exploitation is camouflaged in a highly sexualized society, and children are confronted with images and things that they can't deal with. And so you really have to create a technological space and framework within your home that is safe. Technology can be profoundly addicting. I always talk to parents and I go, let me take away your phone. How would you feel? And so you have to raise kids up in a way that technology is not their everything. And then they won't be exploited by it, which is, 50%, 55% of trafficking is done because of social media, and not only social media, but the internet in general. And I think that parents have to connect with the local organization to really be involved, not just perhaps in donations or anything, but all local anti-trafficking organizations have free resources, have free classes, often prevention classes for parents and for youth, internet safety courses, and a lot of those online are free of charge. Even OVC with the state government has free courses for children. NetSmarts is free. And so it's important to take all of those free courses and pay for more if you want, to get just an exorbitant amount of red flags, an exorbitant amount of training to really understand the culture and pop culture within your child's age range, and what young people are dealing with like in today's culture, and will, as technology begins to iterate quicker than most people can understand or keep up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bello, for your time and discussing all of this with us today. I think it is very informative. If anyone has any questions or any further questions rather, and would like some more information, I know that all of our information will be in our bios, and of course, if there's an email or any way, or they can also look up the More to Life to get more information, and be sure to get Dr. Bello's book, Shame Undone, when it's released. And thank you so much.
April 4th, 2023.
April 4th, 2023. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
So I do see a few questions that are in the Q&A. So one of the questions says, how much is human trafficking linked to the pornography industry? I think that a couple other people on here can answer, but I would just like to say that unfortunately, a lot of what I have, the youth that I worked with experienced was them wanting to, be in videos, right? They wanted to be in different videos. They wanted to, or someone would say, oh my gosh, you're beautiful. Did you ever think about modeling? And that was kind of a doorway to, they would begin to take pictures, headshots, stuff like that. And then it kind of, oh, well, how about you take some in lingerie? And then from lingerie, well, have you ever thought of doing this? So there is always a connection. Well, not always, let me not say that. There is most likely a connection between pornography into sexual exploitation when the gateway was a photographer, if that makes sense, in the experience that I have had. Dr. Epps, I'm not sure if you can respond to that.
Yes, certainly there's a strong link in the scenarios that you mentioned. Also, I think maybe Candace Harrod can comment, one of our colleagues in the FBI.
Sure. I'd love to comment on that because it's larger than people can imagine, the links. One of the things that we saw in the uptick during the pandemic was when people weren't as easily accessible, there was a larger uptick in the pornography and the selling online, et cetera. They're very, very closely connected. And a lot of times where, there's the hotels and the Johns, they'll pay for, that pornography ahead of time. And again, it's throughout. But we definitely saw the uptick with that during the pandemic. Extreme trauma for our survivors, but yeah, definitely linked in many ways.
There was also one more question that came in, and it said, when the trafficker is a family member, how do you help the survivor break/avoid reconnecting with that person?
Okay, so I think the first thing that we have to realize is a lot of them don't tell, right? And especially with our youth. We encourage the youth, if they've got somebody trusted at school, if they've got a school counselor, and that's why it's so important that the teachers get this training and get the information. But we really do encourage them to speak to somebody that they trust first and foremost. And I think that's one of the key things. The other thing is when they tell, what we say sometimes to some of the people in the audience is, if your child, and especially because we see a lot of this with our youth, if they come to you and they tell you that somebody's abusing them or molesting them, please believe them, please. We see so much of this where the kids get rejected because mom thinks they're jealous over their boyfriend, or, you know, the boyfriend said this didn't happen, and the child is the one that gets put out and becomes a runaway that then ultimately finishes up in trafficking. It's very, very common. And so my thing is to anybody, when somebody comes to you, and I know, you know, people don't realize just how common this is, believe them. That child is your blood and that child is your family. And so how you get them is to give them that safe space, give them that trust. And if they're not comfortable going to a direct family member, find somebody that you know you can trust that will get you the help that you need. There are thousands of resources out there. It's just getting them to tell and to speak up. Very often, a lot of the youth that come through, I get them either through the FBI, where it's been a cross-country sting. Somebody spoke about the last cross-country, where there was one actually in 2017, and the youngest age child there was a 6-month-old baby and a 5-year-old child. So, you know, it doesn't have any age limit, and they do these cross-country stings quite often. But one thing I say is with our kids, that not everybody is in that safe place within the home, that they feel free to speak up. So it's encouraging them who they can go to. And if you suspect it, encourage that child to speak up, because very often it's a classmate or a school friend who knows something isn't right, or a teacher or somebody, which is why we say the signs to look for, because sometimes you may save that child that can't even save themselves.
Yes, and I'd like to add that when I was working at a pediatric hospital, many pediatric hospitals have child protection departments or units. And so when a child says something has happened to them, you can go to the emergency room. There's an entire protocol in place. You have to make sure that there are no infections. So there's certain tests that we do, and they go through the chain of possession so that they can be used legally if necessary. They have counselors, they have physicians, and all sorts of resources. So if there is a child comes to you, or if you know of a child, go to the emergency room. Technically, it's an emergency. And there are protocols and procedures in place so that the child is believed, that the evidence can be collected. Police can be involved through the child protection department, so that's not a part of that exam, but it's a health issue. And that's how it's treated, as well as protecting the child legally. Another thing I like to emphasize also, and we use the term victim, which has positive and negative. Some people think of being a victim as necessarily weak, but the term victim has legal protections. And I'm not a lawyer at all, but there are victims' rights, and people who are considered certain victims of certain crimes, there are certain protections and legal rights that person has.
And you're absolutely right on that. And when it comes to, when it comes to victims versus survivor, a lot of that has been implemented over the last few years because of the survivor. And that's their elevation. Like when you hear Dr. Bello talk about the elevation to a champion, that's where they are. And so, 100% when it comes to the law and the legal and the law enforcement, yes. But for people to be mindful that you might want to ask that person how they care to be addressed, because
Absolutely.
Some people don't want to be labeled a victim.
Absolutely.
And like you said, absolutely, Dr. Epps, in certain cases, we have to go that way in order to get them what we need them to have. But it's also important that we respect the survivor also. Thank you.
Agreed.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this, Jen Marie and Dr. Epps, and in absentia, Wincy and Dr. Bellows and Candace for jumping in. So just to be mindful, we had thought that this would be an hour and a half, and we have another 15 minutes or so. So I hope everyone can hang in there with us, and we were not going to diminish the program by by the clock. So please hang in there with us. So before we move into the last segment of it, we're going to try this one more time. Giovanni, if you can bring up the slides for the Club of Achievement reports, if you still have that. If not, we can just do the old-fashioned way and I can just call out the names if that is easier. Giovanni.
Give me one moment. Let's see if it'll come back up.
Okay. Again, each year in the fall, we recognize the clubs that have done great work in our communities. District 3 is 25 clubs from New York down through New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. These 25 clubs do great work locally and help support our international missions, and yay. And so we are going to just kind of quickly just acknowledge the committee chairs and the club winners. So next slide, please. So for the first one is our advocacy committee that was chaired by Sonia Baskerville this past year. Go ahead. And for our large club winner, it is the Prince George's County area. She writes that the Prince George's was exceptional in a number of ways. They had really great programming with their participation in the Bowie Walk Against Violence and the Recognizing Sports Violence program. And they also did some things regarding advocacy and had a standing advocacy agenda at their meetings. So congratulations, Prince George's. The small club winner was the Club of Peconic Bay. Their entire membership is the advocacy committee, and they've been able to implement programs including advocating for ending child marriage in and around New York and forming many partnerships with like-minded organizations for the 16 days of advocacy. So congratulations to the Club of Peconic Bay. Next. Amelia Earhart Committee was chaired by Dr. Karen Siegel. Thank you, Karen, for your leadership. And the large club winner for Amelia Earhart Achievement was the Club of Essex County. They did an excellent job, as always, and congratulations, Essex County. Next. The small club winner for the Amelia Earhart Award is the Club of Morristown area. Congratulations, Morristown, for your work with the Amelia Earhart program. For publicity and communications, the co-chairs this past biennial was Wynn Easterling and Kathy Campbell. And the large club winner is the Club of Washington, D.C. And the small club winner is the Club of Annapolis. Congratulations, D.C. and Annapolis. For the service committee, the chair was Bonnie Robeson. Thank you, Bonnie, for your service. And the large club achievement winner is Harrisburg Hershey. Congratulations, Harrisburg. And the small club, Club of Annapolis. Again, congratulations. For the United Nations Committee, the chair was Pamela Morgan. And the large club winner is Harrisburg Hershey for their continuing work in response to directly to the mission of the United Nations. And the small club is Peconic Bay. Their members attended CSW and were active in the UNICEF projects and had a solid agenda for the 16 days of activism. Additionally, they participated in UN-sponsored projects supporting women in Guatemala. Very impressive achievement. Congratulations, Peconic Bay. The Lieutenant Governor's Membership Committee was my committee last biennial, and the large club winner is the Charles County area. They did a great job bringing back their membership and really devoting their time and efforts towards increasing membership. Congratulations, Charles County. And the small club winner is Philadelphia. Congratulations, Philadelphia was also got the membership grant and were able to have a zing and attract new members. So congratulations all. Thank you. Giovanni, so you can pull these slides down, and we are going to go into the next part of the program, which is what can be done. And the moderator for this section is our District 3 Lieutenant Governor, Dorothy Nauer. Dorothy?
Hi, everybody. Thanks. This section is on what can we do, action steps. And I know after all these powerful presentations, we've heard some steps, but we're thankful to be able to hear from Candace Parrott and Dr. Denise McCain about things that we can do. We're sorry to learn that Amy Michael, who you have her bio, she's ill this morning, and she was going to speak on her extensive experience with legislation and lobbying. But we're going to try to allow 10 minutes for this section. I think we know that that we've heard so much and that we're probably going to have another webinar because we've tried to cram so much into such a small space. So I'd like to first introduce Dr. Denise McCain. She has an extensive bio, and I'm going to ask that you read it in the interest of time, but she's worked on the front lines as a grassroots advocate, domestic violence program director, and administrator at both the federal and the state level for domestic violence and human trafficking. In 2016, she was appointed as the director of Prince George's County Family Justice Center, an initiative of the Circuit Court. And this is a multidisciplinary agency and organization that provides comprehensive services right at the courts to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and elder abuse. And this is done with the support of 22 co-located local government and nonprofit agencies. Dr. McCain also does training. She's on the commission of the Prince George's County and actually chairs the Commission for Women. So that's my brief introduction. And Dr. McCain, would you share with us some action steps or what people that are on this webinar, where we can start, what we can do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction and the opportunity to be with you today. I also would like to just acknowledge our Zonta chapter, award-winning, amazing and award-winning Prince George's County, Zonta of Mid-Maryland, for which I am also a member. So congratulations, and yes, does amazing, amazing work. So I'm very happy to be here with you today and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Again, the co-presenters, thank you. You did a wonderful job of giving a good overview of the background of human trafficking, looking for some of the signs and the red flags. But, I think it's important that we first start out by understanding that, human trafficking is a form of modern day slavery, realistically. It is a serious violation and abuse of human rights, but moreover, it's a crime. This is a $150 billion criminal industry looking at global profits. And it's the second and fastest growing criminal industry in the world. We know that this is illegal, right? So when we look at other crimes, human trafficking, much like other crimes, it flourishes. It's predicated on greed, and it is something that's perpetuated by demand. So when you talk about action steps, what can we do to combat this, to end human trafficking? We generally think about advocacy. We think about legislation and creating laws, which quite frankly, they are, in fact, the cornerstone to a civilized society. They, of course, protect our general safety. They provide access to justice, but moreover, they protect some of the most vulnerable in society, which would be those who are victimized at the hands of predators for whether it be commercial sex or labor trafficking. So the question then comes in, do laws really deter crime, and do they really serve their intended purpose? Legislation clearly is very important. And of course, we know that it's oftentimes very successful. I would say, where would we be today? Myself in particular, as a woman of color, where would I be without laws that have protected me and afforded me rights and opportunities? But we also know that this process, it is subject to the whims and biases of legislators. And we are seeing that quite vividly now with a very divided politic, if you will. These issues have become very politicized. Here in Maryland, we have attempted for over 7 years now to pass safe harbor laws. And those are laws that would essentially, children who are exploited, that commit these crimes at the direction of their traffickers, so that they're not treated as criminals. We do have vacatur laws that recognize that victims are not responsible for the criminal activity for which they've been enforced to engage. The courts are then able to vacate any of those laws or any of those convictions, such as prostitution or other related offenses. But I think we should also be aware of the fact when we're talking about legislation and laws, particularly as it pertains to human trafficking, they also have very real unintended consequences. I'm having a hard time speaking this morning. I need more coffee, really. But nonetheless, trafficking victims, they're routinely arrested and prosecuted as criminals for crimes that they were forced to commit. And even if a victim is able to escape their trafficker, they're nearly never really free of their criminal records that follow them. So convictions for these crimes also prevent them from accessing critical resources and services that they need to move forward. I think that we need to be much more proactive. We have to continue to use our voices to advocate for change. And so there is a place for advocacy as well as legislation, because quite frankly, I think that it is the only thing that will really effectuate legitimate change. But I contend that there is a more immediate response and actions that we can take that quite frankly must be taken realistically if we're ever going to see changes ending human trafficking or combating this issue. And it really starts out with doing exactly what's taking place today, that is educating ourselves about the issue, knowing what the signs are, but also knowing how and when to report. As we have heard, we know that this is an issue that's occurring in plain sight, contrary to what many people have often been led to believe. Watching these movies, it's not about young women being smuggled and taken from countries. These are young girls and boys who are being victimized and recruited, quite frankly, right in their schools, in their own neighborhoods. So these are some of the things that we have to do. I'm also a member of the Prince George's County Human Trafficking Task Force, and we've come up with this very quick and easy way of addressing this, to being aware of some of the indicators and some of the first steps that we can all take in making a difference in the lives of those who've been entrapped into trafficking. So it's about knowing the red flags. We call it the ABCs. The first A would be to ask questions. We've heard about this. Dr. Epps, Dr. Bello, both shared some of the red flags, so I'm not going to go through them again. But we should also think about labor trafficking. It's just as important and prevalent as sex trafficking. Some of the things to think about with regard to labor trafficking: are these individuals working long, exhausted hours with restrictions on leaving their workplace? Do they live and work even in the same place? Are there high security measures, boarded windows, barred windows, security cameras? And do they have control over their own finances or money that they're making? These are just some of the things to think about when we're thinking about labor trafficking. I think we've covered most of those that are most obvious as it pertains to sex trafficking. But the B would be to be mindful. I think Dr. Epps talked about this, about some of the changes in relationships. And I'm speaking now more so to parents, those of us that have children. We need to be aware of new friends. Know who they are, particularly look at those age differences. I think someone else spoke about that. But the bottom line and the real takeaway from this is that we need to keep our children close and maintain good relationships, because there's always a predator that's out there waiting to take advantage of your child. This was also mentioned that you want to be very mindful of what your child is bringing into the house, particularly as it pertains to clothing, shoes, bags, jewelry, electronics. If you see your child wearing some expensive items, or they have new iPhones or electronics, things that you did not purchase for them, that should be an indicator that something else could potentially be going on. You want to know about it. So again, just be aware, be mindful. The C is care. you need to care enough to do something. We need to get involved, stay informed, and advocate for change. Again, I think those are things that are going to make a difference. I would also say when we think about care, recognize that victims, survivors of trafficking generally do not disclose. That has been our experience at the Family Justice Center. We've had to train ourselves to become much more aware of words, signs, body language, indicators, clues, because more often than not, when they do come in for services, it's generally not for the trafficking, it's for either medical care, counseling, but generally speaking, they will not come out and forthright say that I'm being victimized, that I'm being trafficked. So if you do have the opportunity to speak to someone, or you recognize that this is someone who could potentially be in a trafficking situation, you want to be trauma informed. You want to believe them. You don't want to be judgmental or blaming, but you really want to be sensitive to where they are and try to establish a level of trust so that they will further disclose and accept help. And you should, again, be prepared, know about where those resources are so that you can offer them. It's not the expectation that you would be a trained advocate, but you should at least know where those resources are to guide them. The D is disclose. Again, if you see something, you have to say something. Research has shown that 21% of cases have where the victim has been identified has come from reported tips. So it is important to pay attention and speak up. You should also always trust your gut. If something doesn't look right, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. Again, be mindful. You've heard what those clues are. You know what the signs are. Pay attention to them. And if your gut is telling you that something is wrong, it probably is. And then the E, lastly, is to educate yourself. Know about those community resources that provide services to victims of human trafficking. You want to be aware of them. You want to do exactly what Zonta is doing now. You want to host awareness events. This is a crime of opportunity. As I said before, it's perpetuated by greed. So there's also the issue of supply and demand. If there is no demand for it, guess what? There would not be, the supply would also be reduced. I'm going back to labor trafficking. Think about places where you shop. We here in Maryland have had a number of massage parlors shut down because it was determined and found that they were actually individuals that were engaged in sex trafficking there. So you want to be very mindful of where you're doing, where you're going, where you're shopping, and not supporting this industry. And then lastly, I would say connect with your legislators. Again, they are the individuals that have the power, the ability to effectuate change. Sometimes we have to step back and help to educate them. We know that they don't always know exactly what's going on. They are unaware of the issues, but it's our job to inform them, to use our voices, and to make sure that we are proactive and that we're legislating for the things that make a difference. In closing, I will say that this is a shared responsibility that we have to take seriously. We have to keep our most vulnerable populations and our communities safe. Human trafficking, as we know, it's a critical problem. It's a public health issue, really, and it certainly causes long-term harm to both individuals as well as communities. So this is something that we have to continue to talk about. We have to continue to use our voices to advocate for change, but most importantly, stay aware, be present, understand what it is when you see it, and take action. So thank you so much for your time. Again, I appreciate being with you. And I did go through my presentation very quickly because I understand that there is a time crunch here. So I didn't want to belabor any of the issues, but thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, I'd like to say a big thank you to Candace Burke-Parrott. She has been just wonderful. As you can read her bio. She's a life coach, a public speaker, influencer, advocate, social entrepreneur serving at-risk youth survivors and the vulnerable in a proactive, not reactive way. She has her own consulting business. And she's been so wonderful because she said, she's such an expert, but she said, let me fill in the cracks. Let me fill in wherever you need me. So it's appropriate that she'll close out our action steps today. So thank you so much, Candace Parrott.
No, thank you. Like I always say, it's not about us, right? It's about our survivors, our victims. And I just, again, Denise said it so beautifully, everything that we cover. And again, we're all part of the same task force, or the local task force come under the Maryland task force. And so the only thing I add to that is that not all victims know they're victims, right? So we have to meet them where they're at. And when people see situations, I guarantee when you hear all of the wonderful knowledge you've heard today, you don't look at things the same. I promise you that. I've been in this for many, many years, and everything is suspect. I don't care if you're in a grocery store, but if you see something, the one thing I do caution you on, don't approach. There is a hotline, and it's a very easy number to remember, and hopefully it will come up during this. But when you see something, or you suspect something, give it to the authorities and let them handle it, because it can be a very sticky situation. And I second, again, exactly what Denise said. Host an event, because the only way we keep doing it and we get that prevention is to keep letting people know, because people don't believe it happens in their neighborhood. Google your own zip code. You'll be amazed at how close to it you are. And the other thing is that when people talk about them not speaking up, which is very true, we've also got to remember a lot of the buyers are authoritative figures. So when you look at your politicians, your law enforcement, your judges, your teachers, just to remind you of that, the people are they need that safe space. And so a lot of times they will not speak up because of those authoritative figures and the fear that has been put in them. You saw that in the video, right? When they've taken over that mind. So, you know, when you're recognizing those sign indicators, all the things you've heard today, ask yourself, how do I make the change? And what you do is approach your PTAs, your communities, your churches, your schools, and ask, what are they doing? What are they doing for human trafficking prevention and labor trafficking prevention? Because the more we get involved in those places, the more we speak up, the more they cannot ignore us. We just won't go away. We're like a thorn in their side. We absolutely will not give up. So if you feel that you want to know more, reach out to your Zonta group, have them reach out to us. We'll come anywhere and everywhere to do panels and these discussions. I realize we've got all levels on here today in the audience, I'm sure, but just be mindful again. Ask yourself at the end of this session, what can I do to get involved? How can I get involved? You can volunteer at one of your local organizations. We've got hundreds or thousands of organizations that are always looking for volunteers. You can host something, you can, provide the children, the youth information, just anything and everything. And if you're not sure, reach out and we'll help you find something or a way that you can get involved. Thank you so much to Zonta for allowing us to do this. We truly appreciate this. This is what we strive for, is to reach those people that are unreachable. And again, if there's anybody on here that feels that they're a victim or a survivor today, please do not get off the call, stay on the call and speak to somebody. Thank you all again.
Dr. Denise McCain, Candace Parrott, thank you so much. I now turn it back over to our governor, Lisa Burton.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, Candace. Thank you, Denise. This is wonderful. Before we give you all a brief call to arms and make some announcement, I would like to introduce to you the immediate past president of the Zonta International District 3, Governor Pat Latona, and she will be making the announcement about the Governor's Achievement Award. Pat?
Hi, I was going to say good morning, but it is good afternoon. I must say this was an excellent program. I've been involved in the issue of abolishing human trafficking for years and still represent Zonta at the United Nations on the NGO Committee to Stop Trafficking Persons. But there's always so much more to learn and to do. And I congratulate all of the speakers. It really was informative and inspiring. So again, and to the coordinators, thank you. It was an excellent program. And now I have the great honor of presenting the next awards. There are 2 awards now. For the governor, we are now giving an award to clubs which have 15 or less members, and clubs that have members over the number of 15, so that we wanted to even the playing field, if you will. So I'm going to give a brief overview of each of the clubs. So those of you Zontians on this, please take note. And I know that the probably on our website are the president's reports, where you can get more information if something tickles you and you think you might want to replicate what these clubs have done. And so without further ado, the first club I'd like to talk about, I will announce at the end, but I wanted to give you some idea of the kinds of programs that they did. This particular club, it collaborated with another community organization that works to improve the self-confidence and improve the academic success of elementary and high school girls. This is very interesting. This is something I didn't know about. They were actively involved in research for the project First Amendment, First Vote. And this particular organization was actually founded by a member of the Zonta Club of Skaneateles. And what it does, offers civic engagement and leadership development opportunities for teen girls in the effort to create a pipeline of young women willing and able to run for office or seek professional government-related positions. And what this club members did, they contributed a lot of good, important material for the film sequences as well as the modules. Advocacy is also an extremely important projects for them. They have on their agenda item at every meeting is discussion about particular advocacy that is relevant to our mission. They also offer several awards. One of them, and they've been doing this for several years, is a scholarship to a female student who successfully completes level 3 of the English as a second language. And the program is at their local community college. They also sponsor and offer a scholarship to a music student. They've been doing that for years. Recruitment and retention is expected of every club member. They issue news releases about their local service projects, coordinate events with local groups and businesses. They're constantly updating their email list of supporters. Every member is encouraged to share their ideas, which, if feasible, are then developed and implemented with every member participating. They keep meetings short, engaging, productive, and reflective of the passions of the members. And they also mentor all their new members. Their fundraising efforts garnered over $4,000, which included a yard sale, cooking class, and through the efforts of one member who is a violinist in a symphony. She appealed to her family for donations, who were then rewarded with a virtual rendition of William Tell. And of course, she was playing in it. So I am honored to present the District 3 Governor Award to the Zonta Club of Peconic Bay. Their president is Anika Shapiro. They successfully met the mission of Zonta and so much more with 10 members. So congratulations to the Zonta Club of Peconic Bay. And now to continue to the winner of a club with 15 or more members. Members of this club are very active through their hands-on work and their generous monetary and sundry item donation to domestic violence agencies. These agencies help victims, survivors, and their families to heal and become self-sufficient. During the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, members filled handbags with donated toiletries and presented them to 5 different agencies serving the needs of women, such as survivors of domestic violence, trafficking, and homeless women living in shelters. In addition, members volunteer with a statewide coalition dedicated to preventing human trafficking through community events, education, and raising awareness of trafficking. Members coordinated a virtual booth at the coalition's 10th anniversary gala. 2 other Zonta clubs also participated. Several hundred individuals visited the booth and learned all about Zonta and what clubs do to help the coalition. During the 16 days of activism, they requested and received proclamations from their state governor recognizing the meaning of 16 days. And they had the state capitol, county courthouse, and city hall lit up in orange to raise awareness about the International Elimination of Violence Against Women Day. They combined their programs to educate on the particular topic. Now, this is both in person and virtually, and also to raise awareness about Zonta and hopefully recruit new members. Both the public and members were invited via social media and word of mouth to several events, including addressing climate change, a film and panel discussion about violence against women, a presentation by 2 successful women in the aeronautics profession celebrating Amelia Earhart, one of our members, and they hosted an information table at an international women's festival. They had a fundraiser, Paint and Sip. It was a financial success and garnered over 700 guests that actually attended, with 2 guests becoming members. They also raised an additional $1,000 selling Christmas wreaths. At the Paint and Sip, they raised $1,200. They also offer scholarships, particularly to 4 high school girls who are graduating and have been accepted into college. I'm honored to present the District 3 Governor Award to the Zonta Club of Essex County, Presidents Paulette Chapman and Dorothy Nauer. They also successfully met the mission of Zonta and so much more with 22 members. Congratulations. Both clubs will receive an inscribed award from Trophy within the next couple of weeks. Congratulations again, and to both clubs, and allow me to offer my sincere gratitude to all of our District 3 clubs for their tireless efforts to meet the mission of Zonta. And it was an honor and a pleasure for me to serve as your governor during the 2020-2022 biennium, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. That was wonderful. And congratulations to Peconic Bay and Essex County. Just tremendous, just tremendous. I'm so happy for you. All right, so we are going to wrap this up. And we ended this with what can you do? And we want to make sure that everyone knows that what you can do is join us. We are a member organization, and many hands make light work, and we need your help. So for all the non-Zontians or yet to be Zontians on this call, please connect with us. We're going to be sending an email with the addresses of all of our local clubs. And if you're not in one of our areas, please connect with our Lieutenant Governor, Dorothy Nauer, and she will get you in touch with one of our Zonta clubs if you're not in our area, because we need your help. This is a big issue, and there's so many other issues that need to be addressed, and everyone needs to lock arms with us and move forward. On November 25th, we are going to be oranging the world. That's one of our district initiatives. It is the Friday after Thanksgiving. So please, 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 wear orange. Talk to your local government and see if they'll put orange lights or orange flags around local buildings, and then get out there and tell people that there is a crisis of violence against women and what they can do to help change that, as well as ending the scourge of human trafficking. I want to thank the Governor's Events Committee that helped put this together. Nancy Ballas, Mary Ellen Bittner, Jen Christensen, Pam Garvin, Dorothy Nauer, Virginia Moore, Dr. Karen Siegel, and Linda Thomas. And a very, very special shout out to Mary Ellen Winland, who is our database queen and who helped put together the program that and the flyers that will be sent out to everyone who registered for this event. And very special thanks to Creative Hand team and Giovanni Smith, who is with us today and helping us with the tech portion of this program. So without further ado, if you have any questions that we did not answer, you'll be getting a link from us with this recording, as well as the bios for everyone. Please write back to us and let us know what questions we weren't able to answer, and because we have a great panelists and they will be able to get back to you. Also, if you have any ideas going forward on what issues revolving around human trafficking or domestic violence that you would like us to present, please let us know. Again, we have great talent in our district, and we have a willingness to communicate to our communities, especially to our allies and our soon to be Zontians that may be on this call. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, my panelists. Thank you, the committee. Thank you, Zontians and yet to be Zontians who are on this webinar. And we will see you shortly at the next time. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.